more time is all you said to me. And I swore I heard.
Good morning. This is Tylena Goyo on Rise and Thrive on Usula Media. Today I have a wonderful guest, Jason Wesaw, who is a multidisciplinary artist who creates works in an array of media, including ceramics, drawings, textiles, and traditional craft objects. His projects are informed by the land and relate stories that are rooted in place, reclamation, and the acknowledgement of spirit. His creative lifestyle balances being a maker with dedicating time to repatriation, working with old seed varieties in the garden, and assisting in communities across the Great Lakes to share traditional knowledge as a means for intertribal learning and living. Jason, hello, welcome.
Hi, that was quite an introduction. Thanks for having me today.
It's so beautiful. Um,
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of beauty in life, and if anything, during the pandemic, hopefully people have been able to find those little strains and try and make the most of it.
yes, that's right. And I have to say that I follow you on Instagram, and
Okay.
we've known each other for a while through our work. But I
Yeah.
follow you on Instagram, and one of the first things when everybody was pivoting to be virtual was you were doing a rattle making um, workshop
Yeah.
on Instagram Live. And that really caught my attention. Actually, before it was even live, I saw the promo for it and I was really excited about it. So I tuned in. And it really inspired me because we were all trying to figure out what we were going to do and kind of scrambling like how do we navigate this new world, and watching you um, live and people interacting with you live and you being very calmly sharing and teaching, and it was it felt very connected.
Well, you know, I can't do the things that I do without the mentors and the teachers that I've had. And I've been blessed because I've had a lot of good teachers, a lot of good family members that are also makers and have shown me a good way. So the things that I do and the talents that I have or the gifts that I have to share, they're really not mine. So I really try and put that out there. And the pandemic actually has been an amazing time to do that, a really humbling way to do it virtually, because you know how our people are and human beings in general, like we crave that interaction within the communities either that we're from or the communities that we build. And so for Potawatomi people, we always gather every summertime in what's called the Potawatomi Gathering. Because of relocation and reservations, our people are spread all throughout North America. But in the late summer months, we all come together and we share our traditional songs, dances, language, different workshops. And so, with not being able to do that last year, and it's kind of looking like it might not happen this year either. Some of them got a hold of me and they said, "Hey, we know you can do these different things. Would you be willing to hop on and do it?" And it was an incredible time. And honestly, a couple of my kids helped me with it, but I kind of had that same vibe or that same spirit as if we were actually sitting down and working
Yes,
together.
that's what it felt like.
And that's how we have to learn to use technology.
Mhm.
As native people, we've always found ways to use more modern tools in the traditional things that we make, the way that we do them, because that spirit of what we're making or what we're trying to do kind of flows through that, despite whatever tool we decide to pick up and use. So the Zoom and the virtual workshops is just another tool.
That's right. If you can share about how well, you already kind of did. You said that this is who you are, right? But when did you start making art as a means um, to make a living, I suppose?
Yeah, to make a living, I would have to say probably around 2007 or 2008. I was making work, and I just kind of noticed that people were interested in it. And the first art show that I set up at was a small show up on the Saginaw Chippewa Indian Reservation in central Michigan. And I was selling these really humble, rough little, 30 or $40 pit fired pottery pieces next to an Anishinaabe artist from Manitoulin Island who was selling paintings for $10,000. And he sold a few that weekend. And I just said to myself, the ability that I have to create, the interest that I have in making work and telling stories and reaching an audience with my work is something that I'm really interested in. I really didn't go full time in my artwork until just a couple of years ago. So I kind of did some shows on the art market circuit, but I always did tribal work, um, kind of like as my main job. And mainly that work was either in language and culture or repatriation, a little bit in working with the land. But yeah, I did a lot of work for my own tribe over the last 20 years. But the commitment that I made to my career as an artist, and going full time the last couple of years has really been the most gratifying and most rewarding experience of my life. And it came at a difficult time in my life where I was feeling an enormous amount of weight and I felt like I was sinking. But as I was sinking, I kind of told myself, man, you have all of these things, like believe in yourself, believe in yourself, share your gifts, don't hold on to everything so tight and just start letting it go. And that's my philosophy with a lot of things. Online, I try and be really, uh, just really humble and really thankful about the gifts. And that's where I think the spiritual connection comes in because it really humbles us. And in our hard times as human beings, we always have helpers. So that comes through in my work, that comes through in what I try and share in a positive way online. And that comes in with the interactions that I have physically with people.
Can you share more about your repatriation work?
Yeah, uh, I didn't grow up in a tribal family that was immersed, I would say, like in the culture or in, traditional life or daily activities with the community. We were somewhat outside of the community, but that's all I ever wanted was to be an Indian, like teach me what that means, because I could feel it, but I didn't have a lot of those teachings. So in my teenage years, I was just lucky enough to meet some men in the community that were very active in, um, actively promoting, living, teaching our tribal language, our culture, our traditional ways, and that included repatriation. Now, that was before NAGPRA was even enacted in 1996. And that was prior to when my tribe, the Pokagon Band of Potawatomi, was even federally recognized. So there were elders and, I say mainly men in the community, but the women were always there in a supportive role and always had like a voice in what was going on. But for me, as a young man, I can think of those men and mentors that kind of like ushered me into this. And it was never planned on my part. It's just the work that they were doing. And when somebody needed help, like I was there. And it just so happened that I kept helping over the years. I kept showing up. I kept being around, and I learned a lot. I learned a lot from them about these things that are in institutions that they provide these missing pieces, that are leaving our communities like wide open and lost. So, in some ways, that is like the cultural objects of our people, whether it's the beautiful beadwork, our old regalia, functional utensils, but more importantly, what they were always focused on was uh, the repatriation and bringing our ancestors back home. And so when you start doing that kind of work, even as a young man, it helped anchor me in the thought that these things are so much bigger than me. Like,
Right.
this is work that I can do with my uncles and other men in the community, but it's work that my kids are going to have to do someday. So pay attention, you know, move about in a good way. Try and try and teach these people in the institutions that really don't know, teach them about who we are, because so often uh, they feel like a connection to those things, like it's their property. Or even when people have spent their careers researching and developing theses and doing writings and teaching about these things, they feel ownership over their work. And so it can be very confrontational,
Yes.
depending on the way that you go about it. And some of my elders were just like, hands down, like no holds barred. They just walk into these museums and they'd say, no, you're not doing any more research on these bones. You're not photographing anymore. We're here to bring them home. So let's set that process up. So I watch them and I appreciate that. And we live in a time now where I think the dialogue amongst people of different races, different beliefs is much more open. So we have an opportunity to teach along with that obligation to bring our ancestors and our objects back home to try and help make our communities whole again.
Hmm. Yeah. Wow. And I can imagine there being that kind of tension, and to commit to to being a part, like to confronting that tension, and to try to educate in a good way, and teach people so that they understand the importance of bringing our ancestors home. You're right, it's a long road, it's a really long process, and I wonder how you maintain, it's a really powerful process. How do you maintain your strength and protect yourself? And do you know what I'm saying? Like, how do you manage all of that for yourself and for your community?
Absolutely. Well, within the community, we have a really strong network of people that, have committed to this work. And as I said, it was work we were doing before we were even federally recognized. And that wasn't until 96 under President Clinton, or 94, excuse me, that we were reaffirmed as a tribal nation. So we've always known we've been Potawatomi, and we're one of the few Potawatomi bands that remains in our traditional homeland. So even if there's things that um, people might say were lost or kind of went by the wayside, it exists in the land. And so the land informs us and reteaches us about our obligations. And our ancestors are buried here. So it's a really powerful tool to maintain that connection with them. But in the community, we just have a great group of people, and now we have mechanisms through the tribal government that assist greatly with those interactions with institutions, both from a legal perspective and just from like doing the paperwork, which takes an immense amount of time.
Thank you for sharing that. We're going to take a quick break, and when we return, we will be back with Jason Wesaw on Usula Media.
Take me out one more time is all you said to me. And I swore I heard.
And we're back. This is Thailand Ogoyo on Rise and Thrive on Usula Media. I'm here today with Jason Wesaw, and we're having a fantastic conversation. Um, and I'd love to talk about your garden. Are you getting it ready now? Is now the time where you're starting to prepare?
Yeah, now is the time. And, it's a beautiful Michigan day here. It's about 30 degrees and
It's
windy,
still
but
very cold.
the sun's out, and because we're near the big lake, we get a lot of adverse weather and a lot of gray weather. So towards the end of winter, when the sun comes back, that kind of rejuvenates us a bit and gets us thinking about those type of things. And so yeah, I've already got in my sketchbook and my notebook what I want to plant and kind of like the layout of my garden for this year. We're not actually getting any seeds ready just yet, but probably I'd say in the next probably 3 to 4 weeks we'll be putting seeds in the soil here inside. You know, my garden's just an urban garden. I live in a very small town, but I live right in town. And that's one of the most beautiful things about this pandemic time for my family is that we tripled the size of our garden. So we just went from growing, you know, my girls love tomatoes and they love just to go and pick the cherry tomatoes, but we had the extra time. Those early days of the pandemic were just like everyone was so distraught and just it was a scary time. And so our garden is something that we turned to, those seeds and getting our hands in the soil as like a way to ground us and not really shut out the outside world, but for me, like that engagement with the land is something that can be very calming and just really peaceful and kind of sets your mind straight. So we utilized the garden as a way to bond as a family, but also as a way for those seeds to, I don't know how you might want to say, to heal or to guide us through this difficult time. And the interesting thing about the seeds is that uh, you know, when you're dealing with repatriation, what's in a lot of those collections are objects, ancestral remains, but often like interviews, maybe old recordings. And what they're finding more and more nowadays is old seed varieties. So there's movements through the food sovereignty movement and a lot of the native chefs and in communities all over Indian country, like reclamation of our old foods, not just for physical health, but you know, like eating in the way of our ancestors. So we're doing that in a real small way here in our humble garden, but I'm always considering like where my sphere of influence is. There's tons of people out there, and you can see it all over on social media that are doing this work in
Mhm.
a really big way. Um, and I applaud them, and I'm trying to do it in a really small way with my kids. So even just a couple weeks ago, there's a tribal farm way up north in Michigan, and we shared real quick over social media, and a few days later, I had two beautiful packages of seeds arrive in the mail.
Oh, wonderful.
So even though like there's these barriers between us because of the pandemic, we're all trying to find ways to do what we love, to share our gifts, and to connect with people that we're kind of on that same vibe with.
Yeah, that's so true. So I live in Philadelphia
Uh
and
huh.
I built a little garden up on my roof and it was the first time I had ever had a garden. I mean, I've had little plants or herbs. It was so healing. It was so good for me every morning to go upstairs and make sure that they were doing okay and and then we had raccoons, so that was that
Oh,
became very complicated for me because it was my everything was thriving, and then there would be raccoon parties on the roof. I would hear them in the middle of the night, so we had to dismantle it. But I think I'm going to do an adjusted version. But like you said, I have a friend Cassie who lives about maybe 4 or 5 miles away. And when I planted the little seedlings and they grew, I went and I shared them with her, and then they planted them in their garden. And so it was really, even though we couldn't really see each other, like I went to her house and left it on the porch, and she came out and grabbed it. And
yeah,
we were still all very nervous, like we still are now. But um, it was a way to connect, like you're saying, and it feels like it's bigger than you, and it's really special.
absolutely. It's very intentional. It's
Right.
slow, but
Yes.
it's
So
extremely it's
beautiful.
extremely
Oh,
meaningful in this world that we're living in today.
yes. It was so beautiful, and you're right. Something to share with the kids, and take you out of all the other stuff that's going on in the world.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
my youngest daughter, she can't wait to get this garden going. I mean, I think she's hooked already. And So I see in her some of the same things that I experienced. So my
Mhm.
father at a young age, and I can still remember seeing the dirt on his hands of
Uh,
teaching me how to plant corn in the garden.
Beautiful.
And so for many years, I didn't have a garden. It's not like this is something that I've always done or,
Mhm.
that we have a huge garden with a lot of production, but it's just something small and humble. It's healing. It has a lot of memories. And now I'm able to share that with my kids. And
Right.
we ate so good last summer.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I can't wait to eat that good again.
Wonderful. So
Yeah.
soul nourishing.
Yeah,
Feels good. Yeah. I want to talk about art.
I do too.
Yeah. so so you do so many things, which most artists do so many things. But
We
uh,
have to, right?
right? You're like, what's
Yeah.
gonna work for me? What do I feel like today? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So but I would love to jump into your ceramic work and talk about how you came to start doing that. And your style is very unique.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. I got into ceramics in my early 20s, and the first time I tried it at the college level, it didn't it didn't mesh with me. And I tried it again maybe a year later, and working on the potter's wheel at that time, I got bitten by the clay bug, and I've never set it down since. So for me, I ended up as an apprentice in a fully functioning ceramic studio at the college level. So really, what I was learning was um, how to provide for an entire classroom of people that needed materials. So I was mixing clay, fixing wheels, sweeping floors, making glazes, firing kilns, all of that modern ceramic or pottery studio kind of work. At the same time, kind of thinking, well, why is this tradition not something that we ever see in my community? It's never talked about in my community. So I was learning the modern ways, but in my head, I was kind of like trying to retrace these things. So I started talking with people, and there was just no evidence of it having been practiced in many generations in my community. So I just started getting out on the land, sniffing around, asking around, and finding local clay sources. And then I met an Ojibwe man, and he taught me a little bit about what he knows of traditional pottery and those kind of firings. And so some of my earliest work that I marketed and sold and made was called the pit fired pottery. And so it was all hand built and local clays and pit fired, or these really simple outdoor firings. And that's what I brought to the early markets, like the first time I came to IFAM, or the first time that I came to Santa Fe Indian Market. And for me, like to bring my work down there and to get the encouragement from people who come from families where
Mhm.
generationally these beautiful lifeways have been passed down. So to come there as a stranger, to have a booth right off the plaza, and to get tons of people to encourage me and say, wow, we like what you're doing. Keep doing it. Keep coming back. For me, when you earlier asked, like, when did I get into my artwork? For me, that was some of the earliest encouragement actually came from outside of my community. So I always pursued it from there, but I also always had an interest in contemporary arts and the modern fine arts, of basic vocabularies of symbols, really strong color usage, things like that. So over time, I just started streamlining my vessels from being these real bulbous and um, just beautiful forms, streamlining them into these really structured, rigid forms that had really simple symbols and ornamentation on it, and that has kind of become the
That's
style
your
that I'm
signature.
known for. Yeah.
Hmm. So are those fired outside as well?
Those are kiln fired, glazed and kiln
So you
fired. So
have more control in that way.
yeah, absolutely. So similar, also with my drawings, I use a lot of masking techniques and layering, and then the ceramic pieces are fired in kilns, and then they're ornamented. And for me, the ornamentation on my work is is really important because that is kind of like a metaphor for the spirit that emerges from within all things. So that might be you and I as human beings. That might be the spirit of that corn that we're going to grow out back this summer. It could be the spirit of, that's in a river and the way that it flows, the way that it heals us and helps us. So that's what the ornamentation on my work is really all about, is that recognition of spirit in our physical world and how that emerges from within things. So you have to get, and I think this is so relevant to these crazy times we're living in. Like, you have to get past what you see of people on the outside
Mhm.
because it's tearing us up, and
Yes.
we're failing to realize not not only that we are different, but there's beauty in those differences. And once you get past what you see on the outside of things and really get to know it, I don't know if all people can, but for me, I see the beauty in a lot of what's going on in this world. And that's a lot of what my ceramic pieces are about, is that emergence of a kind, loving, beautiful spirit, something that we all possess, but we have to let that spirit be the one that comes to the forefront.
Yeah, I agree with that. It exists, and when you connect with people one on one, I think the internet is making things very difficult in that way because we're inundated with bad news and then a lot of fighting and anger and tension, and you can get caught up in that thinking that that's what the world is. But the minute you shut that down and you connect with someone like a neighbor or something, you're like, oh, right, and it,
Yeah,
it shifts everything. And there is really so much kindness, and there are. I think the majority of people want to make a better world and want to have understanding and and care for each other. But it's really hard to feel it on a day-to-day basis when we're inundated with all this, the news and all these other things. And then you start to get kind of, you know, you can fall into this like bitter and angry trap, pretty easy if you don't realize, get some perspective out there.
absolutely. And I think that's where, as well, as I've gotten older, I come from a community, but I've also tried to build a community of
Yes.
people that um, not necessarily are more like me, but make space for
Hmm.
my ideas or my expressions. And then all of a sudden, you start seeing that you're surrounded by a lot of really good, supportive people, and you see what kind of work you can do together. And, obviously you and I don't know each other well, but I've kept up with the work that you and your crew have been doing with IFAM and then Seeds and the work that you're doing in the city now. And so you know all about that, how important it is of building community and making really small differences just a day at a time.
That's right.
And then you look back over your life and you see that you've really made a contribution. And that's really what it's about, is making a contribution rather than just always being one that takes.
Yes. Yes. And exactly what you're saying, a day at a time, and it has a ripple effect, and you don't even realize it. And maybe 10 years later, someone says, remember that time? And
Yeah,
you're like, whoa, you really impacted, you made an impact somewhere. And that's always the goal. We're going to take a break. We need a break, and then we're going to
let's
come
take a
back.
breather.
I want to talk more about community and good things. So we'll be
Yeah,
back
me
on
too.
Usula Media. This is Tylena Goyo with Jason Wesaw.
Take me out one more time is all you said to me. And I swore I heard.
And we're back on Usula Media. This is Tylin Ogoyo, and I'm talking to Jason Wesaw, who is a multidisciplinary artist, among other things, living his best life in Michigan. um, I want to talk about community again. Um, and you mentioned something about building a life that where you have community and support and people that are nurturing each other. And something hit me the other day because now I'm doing this program that is with a lot of different people, and it's very different to me, the way it's being managed and handled. And
Mm-hmm.
I realized it was such a wake up call to me, that because I'm getting older too, and I realized, whoa, like it had thrown me off, like it was giving this weird reaction. I had this gut feeling like something was off, it wasn't right. I slept on it. I woke up. I was like, oh my goodness, I have built my life to be what I need it to be. Like, I, I think saying it's a bubble is kind of a negative connotation, but I have like created a life that I want my life to look like, where there are caring, nurturing people, where there's give and take, where I can be supportive, you know, people who care about the world, about the arts, all these things. And
Mm-hmm.
so it didn't occur to me that I had done that until I had to jump outside of it for a minute and be in a whole different world.
Mm.
And I thought it was a really interesting kind of epiphany for me, like, how important it is to do that throughout your life, if it's in a good way, right? Like if you're able to do it with people who have kind of a common vision with you, and you're trying to make better change, to make a better world for your kids.
Yeah, I mean, we have to be honest that there's a lot of really difficult conversations and just crazy, terrible things happening in this country and in this culture that we're living in.
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to sugarcoat things, that, you
Oh,
just you,
absolutely.
you just build the community that, is like-minded to you and you can block all the rest of this out. But I just feel like there's really simple things that you can do to try and get people from different places on the same page at the same table. This goes back to what you were mentioning earlier about repatriation and working in these institutions. You know what my mentors and elders, they always taught me? When we would go to these places, we ate together. It didn't matter what we were discussing or how difficult the negotiations or
Mm,
the conversations were. We'd make time to eat together
wow.
because it didn't matter where everybody was coming from, what their beliefs were. When it was lunchtime or dinner time,
Yeah.
everybody gets hungry. And so, like, for us, that was part of the beauty of our culture that we would, in a roundabout way, show them. Like, we would insist on sharing a meal together. Or, for instance, when we would actually have a repatriation, we would oftentimes invite people, or still do invite people, to that reinterment ceremony, so that that gives them a way to see our perspective or our viewpoint. Not that one's better than another, but we all want the same thing maybe and have different ways of going about it.
Mhm.
And so when you're talking about the arts and community, I just think the arts are a really easy doorway to walk into where you can start looking at broader subjects and topics eventually, because it can be very off-putting when it's put in people's face that, hey, this country's effed up, they're not paying attention to the history of what's really going on. Those conversations need to be had, but oftentimes if you can't approach it in a way where um, the audience that you're trying to reach feels comfortable enough to open their ears, they're not going to open their minds either,
Right.
and they're going to start putting up these barriers, or they're
Defensive.
going to close themselves off right away.
Hmm.
That's one of the beauties in art and music, in the different things that we have to share with the world. That I think eventually, once people become more comfortable with the things that we do and the things that we have to say, that they'll open their minds up more to perspectives on history and what hasn't been done right, either on this land or in this world, and how we can make it better. And
Yeah.
that's where the youth become important,
Hmm.
because you and I, as we're getting older, we've learned a lot and we have a lot to say, but we also have to be able to listen to what the young people need and to what the young people have to say.
Yes, that's exactly right. And what you said about um, people being closed off, and that's very much how we approach seeds. Is we we come in wanting to celebrate the arts, wanting to celebrate Native peoples, and share, and then and in that way show our humanity, which I think that has been kind of systematically destroyed, that the perspective of who we are, um, purposefully, right?
Yeah.
And so I at seeds events, I always tell when people ask about seeds, I say we bring joy. We have performers and artists, and you will talk about arts, we'll learn about arts, and then through that you'll learn about that particular artist's traditions, or how they live their lives now, or they have a family, or they work in architecture too, on, when they're not making art. Like, there's so many layers to that, and then
Yeah.
that makes people see you as a person, and then become available to talk about the history and about the tough things, and to and not be have walls up, like you were saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're right, art has that power.
We have to be creative about the way that we open these spaces up.
Hmm.
And for me, that's the interesting thing. And I mean, you can read about it every single day. So it's like these very same institutions that we're trying to get ancestors and cultural objects back from are the same places that, sometimes are wanting to exhibit our art, you
Right,
know.
you have work in the Idle George and in Field Museum.
Yeah, and in different places. And there's always like there's always there has to be a connection, it can't be a disconnect. And we're the ones to make that connection. We're the ones to help them see that. And oftentimes, I've seen recently where artists have pulled out of, like really prestigious shows because they're not in support of the institution's policies and the way that they go about their business as an institution. So there's always this, there's always different kinds of undercurrents, and we have to be really aware of that. But I'm kind of the opinion that, in my grandfather's generation, he didn't have a voice.
Hmm.
We have a voice now, and those voices are getting louder. Oftentimes they're getting more rambunctious, and we have to stay grounded in who we are. Doesn't matter who we're dealing with. We have to keep our identities and just keep doing the work, um, that is our gift to share with the world. And my gift is different than your gift. And so like I don't have to sit on tribal council and be a big decision maker to make a difference. I just have to know myself good enough and what my gifts can do, and then go out there and share them, and then encourage that in other people too. And that's what really making space is about.
Yes, yes. And I like to hear you talk about that as gifts, because sometimes I think, when you're born as a person of color, as a Native person, you have this responsibility your whole life. You're always explaining, you're always teaching.
Yeah.
It's never ending. And so in some ways that can also be seen as a burden. Sometimes you just want to live your life.
Yeah.
Um, but I really appreciate your point of view, that what we have are gifts, and that it's up to us if we want to share them, and share them in the different ways that we do. And so I really appreciate that. I think that's very inspirational, because sometimes I'm
Well,
like, why? Don't ask me that question again.
yeah. Well, I hear what you say, how we just want to live our lives. Like we can't be representatives for all of our
Oh,
people. I
and
mean,
we have to explain that too, because people
yeah,
expect you, and you're like, no, this is my opinion.
yeah,
I don't speak for anybody else.
yeah. I'm an individual who
Yes.
comes from a community, and I love my community. But
Right.
um, maybe after you're done talking to me, go talk to this young lady, or one of my elders over here will have a perspective too. So um, yeah, like I enjoy talking with you today, but how many times have we done newspaper or magazine
Yeah.
interviews and then we come off sounding like we're the authority for
Yeah,
whatever it is that we're speaking on, and it's really just an opinion.
exactly. We
Yeah,
all have our own path.
yeah.
We're all so complicated.
We're all flawed, but we're all beautiful too. So
Yes. Yeah. Wow. I appreciate your point of view so much. So when you're making your work, how, and now we're quarantined.
yeah.
How are you have a website? Can you share that with everybody? And then do you have work for that you're selling on the website?
Yeah, it's jasonwesaw.com, Wesaw. And I'm also on Instagram. When I have ceramic work available, I've been really blessed to work with Charles King and King Galleries down in
Oh, gallery.
Scottsdale and Santa Fe. Yeah, just a really amazing guy, really supportive of me and my work. And yeah, I'm always in smaller shows around the Great Lakes. Um, I would say during the pandemic, if there was one thing that happened that um, kind of took the wind out of my sails, I was supposed to have a show with Rainmaker Gallery
In the
over in
UK.
Bristol, England, and that kind of was put on hold. So it'll happen again eventually. But yeah, I was like really excited to, visit England and have my work over there. So yeah, I'm a maker, but not everything that I do is about making or is about having things for sale too. So
Mhm.
I try and be creative in every approach or every angle that I'm doing things in life. So that includes my interactions with communities, with institutions, with working in the garden out back, with finding new places to hike. I try and take a creative approach with everything in my life. So the artwork, I'm fortunate that I've been able to continue making during the pandemic because I have a couple of studios right downstairs in my home. A lot of people I know during the quarantine and when it was essential travel only, a lot of my artist friends, and you probably came across the same thing. People couldn't even be in their studios to make work. And so a lot of us as artists, that's what drives us is the ability to get our hands and get these ideas out of our head and get them down on something. So I've just been really fortunate to continue working, to continue selling, and more recently, just having opportunities to show work at institutions and get into permanent collections, which is different than the grind of hauling work and packing up work for shows. I mean, I love doing it for the interaction with other artists and clients, but it can be a real grind too, and all about that, the load in and the breakdown and
Mhm.
just the busyness of how shows get.
Right, right. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be back with Jason Wesaw.
Take me out one more time is all you said to me. And I swore I heard.
And we're back on Rise and Thrive on Usula Media, and I'm here with Jason Wesaw, and we were just talking about the art shows and how they can be so busy but wonderful. And you just gave me a feeling like, I not just with seeds in my work, but my father is an artist. I don't know if you know
Mhm.
my father, Chin. So I've been going to art shows since I was baby. I was the oldest. I was the one who would go help set up the booth. I would be like 4 years old. I would do all the things. Um, and you're right, it's a grind, but it also is just so it's like family. Like you go across, you see everybody,
Yeah,
and then yeah, you just got me missing that feeling and just seeing everybody, and there's this energy and this hopefulness, and then getting to grab dinner with someone you haven't seen in a few months or years. And
absolutely.
um,
It's like this, it's a huge buildup and then a release. And,
yes, yes,
similar to what you were asking earlier about, how you protect yourself or keep yourself energized in repatriation. It's like that's what does it is that release and getting to see people or the ancestors getting to come home. There's always that little aspect of it when you're just feeling like you're on the edge of burnout,
Yeah.
and then you get that jolt of energy from the people you love or from your friends or the feedback about your work, and that just propels you.
Yeah, there's nothing like it. I'm missing that so much.
Is
Well,
it is it going to happen for you this year, or is it still like possibly maybe kind of thing?
well, I um we're doing a gallery. Oh, we have a gallery exhibition at Forming Concept in Santa Fe from August to October. So I'm just keeping it there. And if we decide to
Okay.
do a small pop up or something, that will happen down the line. But it was too much to kind of figure out how things were going to roll out, and
Absolutely.
I didn't want to have to worry every day about what was going to happen next.
Yeah.
But we are planning a 1 day smaller version of that in Philly in June 26th. So uh,
Oh, that's awesome.
I'm really excited about that. I just feel like Philly really needs it. you
So
know,
so nothing like that has happened in Philly before.
we did one in 2019. We were
Oh,
planning to
okay.
make it an annual event,
Okay.
but then we couldn't in 2020. So, but this one will be much bigger than the first one. The first one was we had five artists, but we mostly focused on programming because
Okay.
this region that's what's needed. When you go to Santa Fe or you go to Idle George, I mean, you have a kind of a built-in audience that to some degree has an understanding.
Yeah.
But here it's not like that. So we have to start from scratch. So we're starting with, programs about it's a lot of education, which is which is fine. It's wonderful.
Yeah, that's good work, and yeah, you have to build the foundation somehow, and I'm kind of like a humble builder, and I've never been to Philadelphia before,
Yay.
so we're gonna have to keep
Get
the
you here.
conversation going.
For sure, definitely. I mean, we're just thinking about down the road, building this slowly every year, and at some point it will be like our Santa Fe show. It will
That's
be.
great.
It's needed here. But are you planning to travel to Santa Fe? Because I'll be in Santa Fe during August, so I'm not sure what it looks like for us, but I will be there, and I'm open to anything, and I can work quick. So
Yeah, yeah. I really hope to go back down there, but I haven't heard for sure that they're going to have the market. I thought
yeah,
they
I
were
think they're
holding
announcing in
up till
April.
April. Yeah. Um, and the virtual markets aren't something that I can put a lot of energy into because for me, I mean, as an artist, we've got to have the sales. I mean, we've
Yes,
got to keep the studio running, and
right,
my kids aren't eating off of promotion. They
right.
actually it requires money, but yeah, I like the interaction. I need the interaction. I need that energy, and so yeah, if they actually have a physical market, I hope to be there. If it's just virtual again, I probably will just continue making working through galleries and shows and going about things that way.
Yeah, because you have your own website and you have Instagram, so you have your own ways to market virtually anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it was a good effort, an experiment that, everybody tried to just make it work. But I agree with you. I think the virtual doesn't, it kind of falls flat in that way.
It does, but this last year has been difficult on everybody in one way or another. So I respect people's interest and ability to try and keep some
Yeah.
motivation going, and in whatever little ways that we can do that. It's so important.
It's so
And
important.
I don't know if your kids have actually been in school or if they've been doing virtual, but two of mine are in school and one is
Mhm.
doing virtual. And my daughter that's doing virtual, it hasn't been easy for her at all. And I didn't recognize that at first.
Mm.
So I was kind of like, well, what's going on? You're not getting this done or you're not getting that done. But
Oh,
they're just kids, and
yeah.
their motivation was kind of stripped from them.
Yeah.
So I kind of took an approach of not worrying about the grades or the work, but let's get you through this. Let's keep you motivated. Let's get you doing things that matter to you. because it's not all about these little structures and systems that were built in believing. The pandemic has showed us how fast those kinds of things can begin to crumble. So as a
Right.
family, we've got to stick together and support each other. So that was a lesson that I learned and sort of learned the hard way. So yeah, we're all just trying to keep the motivation and keep the positivity and making sure that our priorities are straight and that we're thankful for the little things, really.
Yeah, totally agree with that. And the virtual is really tough on the kids. Mine were half and half for a while. They're heading back in now, and I see the difference in the way their happiness. And
Yeah.
it's yeah, it's been really difficult on them. And you're right. Everybody's had to scramble to adjust professionally, personally, and I don't think that we even understand the effects of it yet until if we're ever fully out of it, we won't even understand because I think we're all still kind of braced. Like, okay, what's next? What do we do next? And we're just scrambling. But
Exactly.
it's kind of amazing to see um like the virtual events we were talking about that those what was born out of it, and maybe they worked and maybe they didn't, but that everybody is keeping on moving forward to just do what they can. No one, I didn't see anybody come to a halt, which is an amazing thing.
Yeah, I think, if there was a halt at all, it was probably right when everything first hit
That was
last March,
yeah.
and there was a lot of paranoia. But after that, like there's
Right, what
just
do we
there's
do?
yeah, there's a resiliency in human beings that,
Right.
we continue to find ways to keep going. And as artists or as, people that are immersed in our cultures and our families, we're always finding ways just to keep doing and keep spreading positivity.
Right. Right. And I like you have found a lot of silver linings. There has been a lot of grief, and last March I was grieving a lot of, I mean, professionally and personally, a lot.
Mhm.
And it was really threw me upside down for a minute. But there have been a lot of silver linings to this past year, like learning to be present and learning to understand, like you said about your daughter. Just I'm not worried about grades either. I'm worried that they're mentally okay,
Yep.
that they're just that make sure they're doing the work, but the grades are not, everything will work itself out.
Hmm.
But yeah, so just it's been a really great year of learning. So I appreciate your perspective on that too.
Well, this has been a lot of fun. I know we're winding down on time, but it's been a really, easy and engaging conversation. And yeah, I hope we continue to be able to keep working together in the future because I think we're doing good work, and there's a lot of good work that's being done in our communities and in the places that we live. And Um, for me, that's one of the most beautiful things about social media is you get to see the way that people are continuing to plug
Mhm.
along, making a difference in whatever little way that they can. You know, I always share what's going on with me in a humble way, not like a look at me kind of thing. It's more like you just got to do it. I'm nothing special, but this is my little piece that
My
I
experience.
can add. Yeah. And I love hitting that like button and on what other people are doing too.
That's great. So if you can share, you are on Instagram.
Yep.
So it's,
Instagram at Jason Wesaw,
and your website is,
jasonwesaw.com.
and in September, it's September, right?
I think the
We'll be
25th.
working with seeds. Yes,
Yeah.
third Saturday in September. Jason
Yeah.
will be doing a workshop, virtual workshop with We Are the Seeds, and it's a free workshop. And we'll have more information on that in a few months. I really appreciate you taking the time today and sharing, and just sharing all of your knowledge and gifts with us. Thank you so
Well,
much, Jason.
well, I thank you for the invite, and it was great to talk with you for an hour.
It was,
I
right?
know it
It
went
was
by
really good.
quick, and
It
it's
did.
been it's been many years in the making, this conversation.
That's
So
so
I'm
true.
I'm glad it finally happened.
Same here. Same here. Thank you so much.
All
This
right,
is
thank you, Tyler.
Eileen Agoyo on Rise and Thrive on Usula Media. We'll see you next week.
We're
Have a great week,
thriving.
everybody.
We're
Bye.
thriving.
We're thriving.
Take me out one more time is all you said to me.